So what is misogyny? How do we know when behaviour has crossed the line from something well-meaning to something else? The working group described misogyny as a way of thinking that upholds the primary status of men and a sense of male entitlement, while subordinating women and limiting their power and freedom. Conduct based on this thinking can include a range of abusive and controlling behaviours, including rape, sexual offences, harassment and bullying, and domestic abuse. And in their briefing, Scottish Women's Aid go further, adding that misogyny can be conscious or unconscious, and men and women can be socialised to accept it. So in their report, the working group set out examples of the testimony they heard about how misogyny is perpetrated, including pervasive sexualised abuse online and offline, threats of harm, including rape, sexual assault and disfigurement, and the emerging threat posed by a growing incel culture. And that being on the receiving end of these behaviours is routine for women and girls in Scotland and places them at greater risk of poverty, ill health, isolation, exclusion and other forms of inequality. Now, it's important to recognise the positive work underway in Scotland to tackle misogyny. Indeed, the motion acknowledges creating new law will not, in and of itself, eradicate the centuries-old cultural attitudes driving misogyny. And I want to thank my colleague Paul McLennan for hosting an event in the Parliament yesterday evening on behalf of the Make Public Sexual Harassment Illegal campaign. And I know the member will talk on this further, so I won't steal his thunder. However, I do want to make specific reference to the contribution made by Graham Golden of the world-renowned Violence Reduction Unit, who encouraged us all to become active bystanders and moral rebels, tapping into our own values and creating a positive culture in Scotland. Last year, Baroness Kennedy gave evidence to the Criminal Justice Committee on the work of the working group and the rationale for creating a statutory aggravation of misogyny and other new offences. Members probed the need for new law when it could be argued there is already a legislative provision in Scotland. And in her response, Baroness Kennedy spoke of the need to address the normalising of behaviours towards women and girls that lead to, as she described, more grievous kinds of behaviour that are the seabed of worse stuff, and that, taking into account all the evidence heard, the working group concluded that new legislation was required. And while I understand...
Liam MacArthur.
I'm very grateful to Audrey Nicholl for taking an intervention. I'm interested in the evidence that the committee took from Baroness Kennedy, and in particular whether or not there was a reflection perhaps on the views within policing or within the Crown Office and legal representatives about the potential for confusion where there was felt to be legislation already in place and addressing, I think, the point that clearly you were pursuing with Baroness Kennedy.
Audrey Nicholl.
I thank the member for the intervention. My impression from the report is that much of the evidence came from lived experience and the voices of people who, women and girls, who have been impacted by misogynistic behaviour. I know that they took looked at international evidence and reviewed that. And I would expect that Baroness Helena Kennedy would have also consulted and taken into account the views of the judiciary. So while I understand the explanation that she gave, I agreed with colleagues who sought clarity around the wording and detail. Creating workable legislation that police officers are confident using as a positive tool to tackling gender-based abuse, and within that misogyny, cannot be understated. And I note the Scottish Government's comprehensive response to the Working Group report, in particular the issues raised around the aggravation and the new offences. And of course the Scottish Parliament will have an important, if not challenging, role in this regard, as other members have already articulated.